This video isn't really about whether characters like Zuko, Percy, or Mike are bisexual. It's about why the suggestion that they could be makes people so uncomfortable. As many might have seen already, clips from the leaked Avatar movie have been circulating the internet. In one of the clips, Zuko looks down at the villain character who is unconscious and being killed by Katara and confirms for Toph that the villain guy is indeed attractive, and then he says, "It's all in the bone structure." Many fans of Avatar have said that Zuko embodies this sort of disaster by character, and I agree. Many fans also see that moment in the clip where Zuko comments on the attractiveness of another man as confirmation of his bisexuality. I personally think the writers just know their fandom and know exactly what they're doing by inserting that moment with Zuko, but I saw many people commenting things like, "A man saying another man is attractive doesn't mean he is bi." And yeah, that's true, but that's not the only reason parts of the Atla fandom say Zuko is bi. I also saw things like, straight up, "He is not." Or, "He's with May." Yeah, she's bi too. That's part of the reason they work as a couple, actually. Plus, a lot of the Avatar characters are bi-coded. Sokka, Toph, even Aang. I mean, personally, I think that Katara is probably the last remaining cishet in that group. You also cannot convince me that May, Ty Lee, and Azula did not all have crushes on each other, but I digress. A lot of audiences, especially straight men, characters like Zuko aren't just characters, they are identification points. So, this aversion to prominent male characters in major sci-fi and fantasy franchises being anything but straight is exactly what I want to talk about. I'll also be using Percy Jackson from Percy Jackson and the Olympians and Mike Wheeler from Stranger Things to build on this point. So last year I went down a Reddit rabbit hole and someone brought up that they felt Percy turned out to be one of those unintentionally queer characters. They speculated that Percy could probably be bi, and there were a lot of reasons they gave. But one of them was that before Luke's eventual betrayal, Percy almost idolized Luke to the point where it felt like he had a bit of a crush. I don't plan to get into the nuances of the arguments presented in the posts, but I'll link the Reddit post in the description. But given Percy's eventual obsession with Luke as his rival, like after Luke has found out to be working with the big bad Kronos, I could see why this person would land on Percy could be bisexual. And anyone can admire someone or be slightly obsessed with them, feel close to them, and get attached to them in some way. That attachment can form unspoken expectations, and, when they hurt you, like in the case of Luke, that can form into a very deep sense of betrayal. All of that can be labeled as someone dealing with, feeling vulnerable. But I think where the Redditor was getting at is when you layer on the fact that for many queer people, especially earlier in self-discovery, because being attracted to the same gender might not always be openly discussed or modeled, the lines between admiration and attraction can be blurred. That point seems underdeveloped now because, like I said, I'm not presenting the entirety of the Reddit post here, and my focus is less on whether Percy is potentially bisexual or unintentionally bisexual, but what I find more interesting was people's reactions. Many of the responses to the Reddit post were bordering on vitriolic, condescending, and at times weirdly defensive, which was beyond surprising given the fact that the creator of the post was literally just propositioning, from what I could gather, a fun argument or an interesting consideration. But a common sentiment that I saw in all these responses was, "Your argument makes no sense because all of it sounds like a bit of a reach." Well, they were just making inferences. Granted, a lot of the reasoning in this case was informed by or rather by the person's own experience of being queer, but this is also a story about Greek gods, so it shouldn't have been that serious. But I realized that a lot of straight people, especially a lot of straight men, don't often feel the need to interrogate their feelings for other people because I guess as a straight man, things are pretty clear cut. The idea is that you're just supposed to be attracted to women and, right, like any admiration or intrigue for another man gets the no homo treatment and life moves on. So it doesn't compute to a lot of straight men that ambiguity around feelings is a thing. There is no such thing as reading between the lines, right? Straight men already have a clear and limited guide on how to emotion, but straight people vastly underestimate their ability to tell whether someone is queer or if someone has had queer experiences. I mean, how do they think queer people were finding each other before the age of the internet? And even now, queer people still find each other in surprisingly organic ways. I also think that a lot of straight people mistake not having a lot of visibly queer people in their lives as proof that there aren't queer people in their social circles. Like, it really can't just be the one gay cousin, right? If your bro is on Grindr, he probably won't say anything about it because a lot of straight people do not provide safe spaces for queer people. All of that to say, I don't value straight people's opinion on whether characters could be queer or not because they're often deeply unaware of just how much their own personal investment in cis heteronormative patriarchy colors their judgment. Straight audiences are not often trained to read queerness, so their dismissal is rarely neutral. It comes from a limited understanding of the expansiveness of human sexuality. But to bring things back to the post about Percy Jackson, another common thread I saw in all of these responses was, what does being gay even have to do with Percy's character? Why does he have to be gay anyway? I just want to acknowledge the very, blatant bi erasure here because the person who created the post explicitly said they thought Percy might have been bi, not gay. They even emphasized that their favorite ship in the series is Percy and Annabeth, and literally said that they didn't doubt Percy's feelings for Annabeth or doubt Percy's feelings for girls in general. But alas, bi men and gay men remain one and the same for a lot of straight people. But back to my point. The why does the character have to be gay sentiment is less so about the very benign speculation of the character's sexuality and more so being offended that you've introduced a conceptual and non-canon, mind you, consideration about a fictional character that they're attached to and identify with. Which leads me to talk about another beloved fictional male character, Mike Wheeler from Stranger Things. Stranger Things is another show with a large group of bi-coded people, Steve, Jonathan, Max, Elle, but you know what, we move on. So leading up to the finale, lots of people were speculating that Byler might be endgame. I'm a Byler shipper myself and thought the same thing. I didn't have a lot of high hopes that they would execute it well, but I thought they might pull a Kurosami and show us a snippet of Mike and Will being together in the last second of the show. As we all know, Byler did not happen, but the discourse about Byler even being a thing received the same reactions of, there is nothing about Mike that reads as gay. Similarly, many Byler shippers thought Mike was probably bi and still very much loved Elle and argued that Mike and Elle's romantic relationship was admittedly not as strong after season 3, hence Mike and Will feeling like a very natural progression given the very queer-coded nature of their relationship. And I'm not talking about Will being gay in this instance. I'm talking about the ways in which Mike and Will's relationship was often portrayed to us as being special than the relationships either of them had with other characters in the show. So many other creators have talked about this and talked about why they think Mike's feelings for Will was reciprocated, so I won't get into that here. But I will say that Stranger Things Season 5 is one of the most egregious examples of queerbaiting. I really don't even have the energy to substantiate that point in this particular video, nor is it my focus for this video. But you cannot tell me that their media team didn't know exactly what they were doing in terms of consistently highlighting Mike and Will's relationship in the promo material. I mean, all of a sudden, everyone was talking about this scene in the rain in season 3, just before the first few episodes of season 5 were released. There were these consistent conversations about like Mike and Will's friendship and alluding to a recovery of that in season 5, which we didn't even get to see that in the final season, really. I mean, maybe that like one, like, you're a wizard moment, maybe. And oh my god, the bad innuendos when Mike and Will were together. Plus, in season 5, Mike and Elle's relationship was not even that significant. In my opinion, it was worse than season 4. Yeah, in the final episode, I guess, because of what tragically happens to Elle, Mike's love for her and everyone's love for her is brought to the forefront. But from my perspective, it wasn't that emotionally impactful. I mean, overall, I don't think it was a good decision to do what was done to her character. And this is coming from someone who not only loves Elle as a character, but thoroughly enjoyed her and Mike's dynamic between seasons 1 to 3. But I'm getting off track. So why can't characters like Zuko, Percy, Mike be bisexual, especially these characters who are the leads in major sci-fi/fantasy series? It's because a lot of straight people, lots of straight men in particular, would find it uncomfortable to identify with a queer character. Even people who are like, I don't have a problem with gay people, can still showcase an expectation that the characters they love and cherish must remain straight. Because queerphobia and a desire to reinforce this heteronormative patriarchy insists that there isn't anything a straight person could identify with in a queer person. Because many people have internalized that straight narratives not only are universal, but should be. Queer narratives are seen as optional or niche, and this creates that, or it creates the case of queer people identifying with narratives that don't center them, but straight people resisting to do the same. I mean, queer audiences have been relating to straight characters forever. I understand the straight people who say marriage could only be between a man and a woman. I understand how they'd feel so strongly about it. They'd believe it would sully their experience to open it to others. That this feeling might be so good, and yes, communal, and what would bind me into it with others is something I would want to keep just that way. Oftentimes, we see how straightness in many of these stories, like Percy Jackson, Stranger Things, Avatar, is not incidental. It is part of the structure of the fantasy itself. So when people ask, why does the character have to be gay? What they're really reacting to is not the sexuality itself, but the loss of the narrative certainty and the expectation that they might have to relate to someone who isn't exactly like them. Another key thing that would upset a lot of the straight fandom, again, especially a lot of the men, is that if someone like Zuko, Percy, Mike were to be confirmed as bi, it would disrupt the fantasy of the unremarkable underdog who still gets the girl. I mean, with Zuko, he comes from a place of privilege, but he's not liked by his dad. For the longest time, he's not really respected. He's an outcast and spends part of his time in exile. So he's still pretty much an underdog. I also think it's fair to say May is depicted as someone he thinks is cooler than him. I also do understand that with Percy too, he's the son of one of the big three, which is a major deal. He already embodies a kind of chosen one energy, but he doesn't see himself as deserving of special treatment because of his divine heritage. And while he's brave, like Harry Potter, he's not exceptionally talented. But hopefully you get my point. Suggesting these characters could be queer disrupts the very specific fantasy that an ordinary, relatable male protagonist can go on an extraordinary adventure and still be rewarded with the girl. Romance, as a reward for straight characters in sci-fi and fantasy, functions to preserve this larger societal fantasy that romance itself is exclusive to straightness. And I think that's why people get so up in arms at the suggestion that one of their faves could be queer. That's why we get a lot of the defensive, why does the character have to be gay anyway? I mean, why do they have to be straight? If we really think about it in the context of a lot of fantasy and sci-fi stories, romance, for the most part, isn't always necessary. It's a nice to have. It feels Like, it's a standard at this point, but it isn't usually a requirement for the progression of a story. Queer readings don't take anything away from these characters, they just expand what they're allowed to be. And if that expansion feels threatening, it's probably worth asking why.